measurement bias, but we'll also talk about how to make sure that we prevent what we call unmeasured confounding when we design questionnaires. So let's get started. We also have a hands-on section. So if somebody has a questionnaire that they want us to review, you can upload it in Google Doc and share the link with us so that we would, after this session, our hands-on review would be looking at your questionnaire and making changes to it. We're going to critique it. So please only share that link if you are comfortable with criticism. So if not, please, you can pass. All right, let's move on. Let's start with our slides. Lungli, please confirm you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
All right. All right, let's get started. So why do we need a good instrument? And by the way, we talk about questionnaires that we call them instruments. Instrument it doesn't mean a physical instrument, but it means the vehicle you are using to collect data. So instruments could be structured questionnaires, they could be unstructured questionnaires, they could be interview guides. All of those things are collectively called instruments. So why do you need to have a good instrument or a good questionnaire for your study? Well, you imagine the amount of time it takes to conduct a study. You take, a huge portion of your time to dedicate to this effort. The planning, they go back and forth with your collaborators or supervisors. The least you can get out of it is to make sure that your data are fit for use, that you collect good data, right? And so that effort has to count for something. And so it's important to make sure you have a good instrument because you want to make the most of your data collection activity. You also want to avoid costly or embarrassing errors. It's extremely expensive to get data is expensive, especially when we conduct large studies. You're spending millions of dollars to do studies. The last thing you want is spend all this money and then end up with data that are not even good for whatever reason. And so that is an extremely costly mistake. And so that's why we go through a whole lot of processes to make sure that we do it right. And of course, also avoid embarrassment. It's quite embarrassing, conducting studies with ill or very poor measures in our questionnaire. As scientists, we're interested in truth. How do we publish what is truthful and avoid bias? Like I mentioned earlier, there are many types of bias we're concerned with. Confounding bias and measurement bias and selection bias. As far as questionnaire design, we want to make sure that everything that needs to be captured is captured. You don't want a scenario where you collect data and then you publish a paper, you send a paper to a journal, and the editor-in-chief says, "Oh, why did you not adjust for so and so variable?" And you're like, "Oops, we did not collect data on that." Right? You have a problem now because you have unmeasured confounding. That variable of interest is a confounder, but you did not measure it in your questionnaire. So if you did not measure it, you cannot control for it. And that's what we mean by unmeasured confounding. The variable is a confounder, but it was not measured in your study. So it is unmeasured confounding. And so you want to give very careful thought to how your instrument is designed. This is why you can't just go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, give me a questionnaire for my study." There has to be a serious intellectual component involved where you, as an investigator, you sit down and you think through the study very carefully and think of all the variables that are needed so you can make sure that your instrument is complete. And also, when you give careful thought to your instrument, it makes research more pleasant for your participants because they ultimately have to give their time to you. So a careful consideration of processes or approaches to avoid bias means that we must think about the steps that are involved when somebody answers a survey question. So you create your survey question, you give it to participants and say, "Please answer these questions." For any given question, what are the steps involved for that individual to give you an answer? Well, there are three basic steps. One, they have to read and comprehend the question. So whether it's on the paper or it's on the screen, they have to read it and they have to comprehend it. And next, they have to extract the answer from their brain, right? They have to recollect the information from memory. And then thirdly, they have to put it down on paper, whether it's writing it down on paper or clicking on something. They have to provide that answer to you. So they take in the information and they put out the answer. But between those two processes, they have to process it in their brain first. Now, any of these three steps, there could be significant problems with it. And any major issues with any of these three steps could result in bias. So let's break that down. The first step is you have to read and comprehend the question. Now, what happens if you cannot read and or comprehend the question? So there are two issues here. You cannot read the question, or you can read the question, but you cannot comprehend the question. Now, why might someone not be able to read the question? Well, maybe the font is too small. Maybe the font is completely illegible. You use a very crazy font that nobody can read. Maybe it's a lot of cursive characters and nobody can read it. Maybe you printed your questionnaires and the ink is very, very thin, and no one can read this questionnaire because the font, the printing is so poor. Or if it's on a screen, you use colors that are not web friendly. And so imagine using a color like yellow on a white background. It's nobody can read that, right? So there's poor contrast between the paper and the text, or between the screen and the text. All of those things will mean that somebody cannot read your questionnaire. Now, it could also be because people can read it, but they just cannot comprehend it. Why? Well, you're using jargon, like you're using a lot of big words. The goal of creating anything, any communication, whether it's a questionnaire or a manuscript or any text you're creating, the goal is not to impress anyone. The goal is to communicate. So if the goal is to communicate, why then would you choose to use big words or technical words that no one can understand? You have completely failed in that mission. So use simple words that people can understand, right? Because the goal is never to impress anyone, but to simply communicate. The same thing with technical language. Technical language should not be in the survey, because you want to aim at the 12th grade level. You imagine that you're writing for a child, a teen, right? And so that is what you want to target at. You fail to use the right words for your audience. The survey, or the kind of language you will frame in a survey for youth, will be quite different from that for a survey for adults, for example. And so when you are creating your survey, it's very important for you to check the readability of your survey, right? So let me quickly show you how to do that before we leave that page. So in creating questions, so let's say this question I have here, make sure you check on the survey info that tells you what language, like how complex is the language used in your survey. And so when you click on the info icon here, it tells you some things that are of interest in that domain. You have a Flesch-Kincaid grade level score, which will translate to these two indicators below. What is the approximate grade level for your survey? This is based on the US educational system. So this is like 7th grade. So that's somebody in that's a teenager, right? And the reading ability is easy. So this is an easy survey. So whether you are familiar with the Flesch-Kincaid grade level or the approximate grade level, this will tell you whether it's grades 1 to 12 or whether it's college level or whether it's really professional. You want to aim at reading grade levels of between 7th grade and 12th grade, or something definitely less than 12th grade, right? That is where you want to aim for your survey to be in terms of readability, and it should definitely read as easy. If you have a survey set up and it's telling you that the survey it's hard or it's for professionals, then you might want to simplify the English a little, because it's obviously too complicated. So those are things you want to give attention to, because then that might suggest that your survey might fail to reach the right audience. So in other words, you're asking a question, but the answer you're getting back is the wrong answer because they cannot understand what you're saying. So people have to understand what you're saying. And so for that, you must use small words. You must use everyday language that everybody can understand. No instructions provided. That's another problem with why individuals may not understand or comprehend your question, because there are no instructions provided. Like, how am I supposed to answer? I need to understand clearly. And everybody must understand the exact same thing in your survey. This is a requirement, and this is where bias comes in. The bias comes in when I understand your question one particular way, and the next guy understands it a completely different way, and the next guy, and so on and so forth. So we are all understanding this same question 1 million different ways. That is a problem. You obviously have bias in your study because people have understood the question in different ways. Everybody in the survey must understand the question the exact same way for you to say that your questions are free of bias. Otherwise, you have deliberately injected bias into the study. So every survey question must have 3 parts. There must be the question stem, there must be the instructions, and there must be the response options. If your survey question doesn't have those 3 parts, then something is wrong. Your question is not complete. So the stem, the instructions, and the response options. And we're going to show that in our demo shortly. And then users also may not understand the question if your questionnaire or your questions are vague. Again, we said questions have to be very clear. Everybody must understand the exact same way. But if your questions are vague, or if they're double-barrel means you are asking 2 things in one, right? A question must ask only one thing, and one thing only. You can't just carry different concepts and ask them the same question, right? One question, one item. So when you're not asking 2 different things in the same question, we say that question is double-barreled. We're going to look at some examples to illustrate that in a minute. So again, the issue of reading and comprehension, those are some of the problems that could arise from the failure to read or the failure to comprehend, or both. The failure to both read and comprehend the question. So let's look at some examples. Here, it says, is there a lot of traffic in your neighborhood? The question that raises is, okay, what do you mean by traffic? Do you mean foot traffic? Do you mean car traffic? Do you mean animal traffic? Are you referring to computer traffic? Like, that is a very vague question. So if you ask this question, different people are going to interpret that question differently based on their background. Somebody who lives in an area where there is, by the roadside will say, oh, well, you are likely referring to cars. Someone who lives in where there's a bush path will think, oh, So you have to be very clear in what you mean by traffic. And so here, second one is, do you prefer dichotomous or semantic differential questions? This is a very complicated question. You have a lot of jargon, big words. Dichotomous, like, wow, that's such a big word. Semantic differential, like, what does that even mean, right? The question is too complicated. And so the vast majority of your audience are going to be lost and say, okay, what are you talking about? Then you have another question that here says, how complete and accurate was the information you received about prenatal nutrition? This is what we call a double-barrel question. Do you want me to answer about the question, how complete it was? Or do you want me to answer about how accurate it was? Because it's possible that it was complete, but not accurate. Or it was accurate, but, so the issue here is that, you have a double-barrel question, in which case, the users may not be clear about what they have to provide in terms of an answer. So that is an example of a double-barreled question. And then the next one is, please rate the extent to which you agree with the following statement. Nobody can deny that few doctors are unconcerned about cholesterol levels. Now, this is a mental, this is a mental gymnastics that anyone who answering this question has to engage in. Like, you have to, first of all, decode what this individual is asking before you even answer it, right? So you want to avoid negatives, because you are giving people a quiz to now try and figure out what you are asking for, right? And people are not patient. Nobody has the time to sit down and start trying to figure out what exactly you are trying to ask of them. And so it becomes very hard then to give you a correct answer in that way. So try to avoid use of negatives, because the question gets completely lost in in translation. All right, so we've talked about the first step, which was the ability to read and comprehend a question. The second step is this one here, which is you have to recollect information from memory. So now that you've read and comprehended the question, you need to fetch the answer from your memory. And so there are certain things that could make it impossible for you to recollect information from memory. So let's look at some of those things. One is if the question is loaded. Well, we'll talk about loaded questions or leading questions. The user is supposed to fetch the question from their own memory or their own brain. But when you set the question in such a way that you are superimposing your own brain or your own thoughts on theirs, it becomes very hard for them to give you an independent answer that comes from their own brain or their own memory. So loaded questions or leading questions end up giving you answers that come from your own brain and not from their own brain, right? That's a problem. We also have issues such as ordering bias. Ordering bias is when individuals pick the answers that are most obvious, that are most easily accessible, right? If you have a very long list of items, so let's say I give a list of 200 items, like 200 cars, and I say, please select the cars that are your favorite. Very few people are going to scroll down this whole list and look at it comprehensively and study it and say, oh, I think from this list of 200, this is my favorite, or these are my top favorites. Most people will just select the items at the top. So you can see here that the order of items has now introduced bias, whereby the items at the top are more likely to be selected than those at the bottom. So in this case, the individual has not truly recollected or fetched the memory or information from their memory. They have just fetched the information that is at the top of the list, not what truly is in their mind, right? So another problem might be just how items are positioned in our survey, whereby we are unknowingly introducing ordering bias in our questionnaire. And there are ways to address this. I will talk about that in a minute. And then ordering or asking questions in ways that make people to just clam up. These are issues that may be considered sensitive. And of course, the word sensitive is very subjective. What is sensitive in one context or one environment may not be sensitive or deemed as sensitive in another context. For example, if you ask questions about sexual orientation, in certain environments, people will feel very awkward. Like, why are you asking me about my sexual orientation? That is because it in that environment is deemed to be awkward, right? So you have to understand the context in which you're working or you're operating, because then that determines where you even position this kind of questions. Obviously, you don't want to put that question as question number one, like, what is your sexual orientation? Like, wow, this is quite a survey, right? So when you are aware that there are sensitive questions in your survey, you want to pay attention to how you position them, how you frame them, and even where you position them in the survey. And then giveaway, you also want people to tell you what they really feel, and not just a get out of jail card that they just want to take the easy way out. And so you want to be very intentional about how you use neutral options. Things like neutral or neither agree nor disagree. So sometimes you really want people in general always have an opinion about something, whatever it is, whether it's gun violence or gun control or abortion rights, or especially when it's sensitive topics. People in general always lean one way or the other, but then there's always also the need or the perception to want to be socially desirable. So for such issues, when you give people a neutral option like I am neutral, many people will just go ahead and select that option. So you want to give very careful thought, especially when your topic involves social issues that are very delicate, right? In such cases, you might want to really make people choose which side of the aisle they stand on, or so that because that's the whole point of the research, to figure out where people stand on issues. And so in such context, you want to be very intentional about how you introduce neutral options, because most often in time that those are get out of jail answers. And then giveaway words. You want to make sure that what people are answering are what really comes from their mind and not just where you are leading them. And so certain words may not necessarily be appropriate in that kind of context. So let's look at some examples. Do you practice risky, unprotected sex? Okay, that seems to be a very judgmental question. The way it's framed makes the user to say no, like because the question just seems very judgmental. So everybody wants to project an aura of I am a good person, that I obey the laws and rules, and so when you ask questions that way, those are kind of questions that will lead to a lot of bias in answers. And then, do you always buy 100% fruit juice for your kids? You also want to always avoid extremes. What do you mean by always? Right? So of course, every parent wants to be perceived as a good parent. So they'll say, yes, I always do that. And so you want to frame it in a way that captures the construct of interest. And we're going to see more of this in our hands-on session. How often each week do you exercise? So here you have already injected a bias into the question unknowingly. The question now is how often. You're already assuming that this individual exercises. So by saying how often do you exercise, you are now asking them about, all right, now that I've established that you exercise, how often does that occur? So this is a giveaway word that may not necessarily align with what you're trying to capture, because now the user feels the need to tell you that, well, I exercise twice a week, because now the issue of whether they exercise or not is not even in question. It's about how often does that occur. And then this one says, how harmful are e-cigarettes to a person's health? So here you have allowed your own biases to creep into the question. Like, how do if I have never heard about e-cigarettes, your question automatically suggests to me that I should think that e-cigarettes are harmful, because you just came out of a box and said, how harmful are they? So this is a very biased question, because you are leading the participant towards an answer that you may want. You are telling them that, well, I'm going to give you a hint. E-cigarettes are harmful. Now, how harmful do you think they are? Are they? Right? This is a leading question, because it is not neutral, and it seeks to push the participants towards one particular direction that may not necessarily be the best in terms of validity and framing of things. So you want to avoid terms like harmful or how beneficial, because whether it's for the positive or for the negative, you are leading the participant into one direction that is not appropriate. All right, so the next step in answering a question is to summarize your answer and write it down. So I've read the question, I've understood it, I've fetched the answer from memory. Now I have to put the answer down. Now, what problems could arise from this? Well, you could have mismatched attributes between questions and responses. So I know the answer I want. I have fetched it from my memory, but geez, I cannot see it on the paper. The option simply does not exist on the paper. That's a problem. Or it exists twice, because there's an overlap of the answer options. And now I have two answers. I'm not sure which one to select. We're going to look at that in a minute. Or the response options are not exhaustive. The simple rule of thumb is, for questions like multiple choice questions, your responses must be mutually exclusive and must be collectively exhaustive. So that means that option A cannot overlap with option B. And between options A, B, C, D, and E, or whatever you have, they must capture all the options that could ever exist in the whole world, right? So that's what we mean by question items being mutually exclusive, yet collectively exhaustive. So you have a problem when your question options are not mutually exclusive. You also have a problem when they are not collectively exhaustive. Both of them are problems. And then no exit options for persons not applicable. So if you are asking me, when was the last time you traveled out of a country? Okay, what if I have never traveled out of the country? There has been an option for people who are not applicable. So you either say, I have never traveled out of a country. So that's a very common problem. People ask questions and they don't provide an exit option for individuals who are not applicable. All right, let's look at some examples. You indicated that this pregnancy is unplanned. What are the reasons you did not take precautions to avoiding becoming pregnant? And so the options are: didn't think about it, forgot, thought I couldn't get pregnant, no access to birth control. There are many problems here. The question assumes that unplanned pregnancy means that there was failure to take precautions. What if the individual took contraception but it just failed, right? That option is not there. The question itself also sounds very judgmental, right? So that is some areas that will work. That's some areas that make this question somewhat poor in its framing. Then the second one says, how big is the risk of side effects from vaccines? First of all, this is a leading question. If I have never heard of vaccines before, you are now you're trying to plant the idea in my mind that there are side effects, that there are side effects that are guaranteed from vaccines. The question is, how big is the risk, right? So that's the first issue with the question. The second issue is that the question itself is assessing the magnitude of the risk, but the response options are talking about frequency. Magnitude and frequency are completely different things. So you have a mismatch between the parameter being assessed in the question stem itself versus the parameter has been supplied in the answers. One is talking about apples and apples, the other one is talking about oranges. Like, those two things are not comparable. So if you're talking about the magnitude of a risk, the answer options should also talk about indicators of magnitude. But here we're talking about indicators of frequency, whereas the question stem was assessing indicators of magnitude. That is wrong because you have mismatched attributes. The second question is, what best describes the age of sexual debut? All right, that is a technical term. Users may not like, what do you mean by that? It's the lay audiences or people who are very young may not even understand what you are referring to. And then you also see response options that are not mutually exclusive. You see this option, the fourth option, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth option is 18 to 21 years old. The fifth option is 21 to 25 years old. And then the last one is also 25 or older. Okay, what if I'm 21? Where do I select? Do I select option C, D, or do I select option E? Also, if I'm 25 years old, which do I select? Do I select 25 or do I select this? So the response options are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you also see questions like people will say 25 years and older. Now, that is also grammatically wrong. You can't be 25 years and older at the same time. You're either 25 or older. So small things like that matter in terms of the framing of the questions and the kind of answers we get from them. Then this question says, the last time you visited a dentist in the past 12 months, were you asked whether you use any form of tobacco? The answer is yes or no. The problem with this question is, what if I did not visit a dentist? Like, what am I supposed to select? So you see that a lot of people will select the answer no, which gives you completely invalid answers. So you would then come out and say 60% of people who visit a dentist said that they were not advised by a dentist to quit tobacco use. But that estimate is completely wrong, because that no you have there includes people who visited a dentist but were not advised, as well as people who did not visit dentists at all. They just didn't have any answer to select. So you forced them selecting that answer no, and then you use that wrong answer to now publish a wrong estimate. So the moral of the story is that you want to provide exit options for people who are not applicable. This is the point we're trying to make here. People who are not applicable should have an exit option. So you want to make your research question spicy. SPICE is an acronym for questionnaire development. There should be strategic assessment, there should be planning, there should be item development, there should be control for quality, and then evaluation when you develop questionnaire. So don't just wait. If your questionnaire took you just one day to create, then it's really, really shallow. Questionnaire development is an iterative process that takes time. So it starts with what are the needs? What are we trying to capture? What are we trying to assess, right? You might do formative research and say, okay, what exists on this topic? It might be literature review. You might go to blogs to see what people have said about those issues. And then you go to planning. You want to have a statistical analysis plan to make sure that you don't mistakenly leave out things. Because coming back after the data has been collected is medicine after death. So sit down. It doesn't have to be a formal statistical analysis plan with many, many pages, but you should give thought to how the analysis will be done before you collect the data. So you say, okay, I have a questionnaire here. This is how my mock table will be, and I'm going to adjust for so and so. Then like, oops, actually, I said I'm going to adjust for let's say age or duration of HIV. Do I even have that variable in my questionnaire? Then you go and you see, oops, I forgot to add that question. And then you add it back, right? So there should be some effort at putting together an analysis plan. It doesn't have to be funny, it doesn't have to be formal or long or complicated, but there has to be some mental or intellectual effort to put together a plan for an analysis, right? Because that is the only way you're going to realize that you forgot items. That is the only way you can control for unmeasured confounding. And then item development. Sit down, you draft the questions. The first draft should just be making sure that I have all the items there, right? It is not meant to be perfect. It should have a lot of flaws, right? Because the model for writing should be FBR, fast, bad, and wrong. First draft should just make sure that you have captured everything that you need there. And then subsequent iterations will be making sure that there are no typographical errors, that the wording is correct, and the order of items also makes sense. And then control for quality. The process of questionnaire development should include feedback. So you give it to your colleagues and say, hey, I have this questionnaire. Can you please review and let me know your thoughts? So try and get feedback from at least 3 people, and let them give you the feedback on, preferably as a Word document, with track changes, and then you can review, you can chat with them and make improvements to your questionnaire. If you don't have people to talk to, well, you can use ChatGPT. Copy and paste your questionnaire in ChatGPT and say, can you critique this questionnaire? What things are wrong? What things are missing, right? What grammatical issues do you find? So there should be some kind of evaluation, right, from an expert, whether it is an AI assistant or it is some human being or your professor or your colleague, that has to be there. And then cognitive testing. Cognitive testing is a process where we try to make sure that what we are capturing is actually what we intend to capture. So we give the survey to some participants, individuals who would fit the criteria for being actual participants, and they take the survey, and then we'll go back to them and say, okay, what was your experience, right? What issues did you have with the survey overall? Then you go through each question. Question 1, when you read that question, what did you think it meant? Oh, is that what you thought? Oh, that is not what I thought at all. That was not what we intended. So you make corrections, right? How can we frame this question in a way that is better understood? You take those feedback, you incorporate them in the question, you test again, right? And so that makes sure that at the end of the day, the instrument does what it was intended to do. It captures information in a way that is valid and that is free of bias. And then after you've done all of your expert feedback and cognitive testing, then you end up with a finalized questionnaire. Now, this is now a clear questionnaire that you can then field. It's always good to do a pilot survey with this final questionnaire to see what are the completion rates, because at this point now you have a finalized questionnaire, but it's like, does it work in the field, right? So you can do a pilot where you administer it and see you're looking for indicators of data quality. How much missing values? Are people skipping questions? What kind of questions are people skipping? Why, right? Are there issues with the quality of data we are getting? And you might want to capture, for example, age, and you forgot to set age as a numeric value. And so people are busy typing in string or like letters. Like, oops, this was supposed to be numeric. So you go back and change the settings to numeric. Those kind of changes that need to be made midstream can best be uncovered during the pilot. So the bottom line is that creating a questionnaire is a lot of work, and so you want to give a lot of attention to it to make sure that everything works out fine. Now, some practical considerations. Questionnaire design, do you want to be theory-based or not? And there, especially for people in the social sciences who do a lot of work with social theories, if you're going to use a theory, then you want to make sure that the questionnaire contains all elements of that theory. So, for example, if you're looking at, let's say, research on vaccination, let's say in northern Nigeria, you're looking at why is there hesitancy towards taking vaccines, let's say polio vaccines, among a certain population. And you have decided that I am going to underpin this research on the health belief model. Well, the health belief model has certain components like perceived risk, perceived benefits, and so many other indicators that are all tied with that theory. Well, if your research is based on that theory, you want to make sure that you have questions that address all the specific aspects of that theory so that it's complete, right? So these are some of the considerations that you have to make. Nobody's forcing you to use a theory, but if you're going to use a theory, then you have to make sure your questionnaire adequately addresses all the components of that theory. And again, this is where ChatGPT or AI comes into place. You can just tell AI, hey, my questionnaire is based on this model or this theoretical framework. Please review my current questionnaire to see how complete it is or whether it addresses all aspects of that theory. And if there are any things missing, can you suggest them? Right. These are ways you can use AI to just make your life easier and to be your thought partner so that it assists you in thinking about the kind of work you're doing. So for the structure too, you want to assess, do you want to have multiple populations or just one population? And so if my study is on tobacco use, do I want to include only smokers or do I want to include both smokers and non-smokers? So if I'm going to include smokers and non-smokers, then that implies that there may be questions that may be focused only on smokers or only on non-smokers. And so am I going to use skip patterns or not? Those are some of the decisions you have to make as the investigator. Also, the response options. Do I want them to be categorical? Do I want them to be continuous? And then that boils down to the kind of questions that you're going to use on the platform, right? If for example, you're trying to collect age, should I put age in categories like 20 to 30, 40 to whatever, or should I just allow them to select the age? Whenever you can, it's best to allow users to provide the most nuanced answer possible so that later on you can recategorize that into any group you want. And then the decision whether to use open or closed-ended questions, that is also good. Good consideration to take into mind because closed-ended questions means that you are supplying options that you have decided already. So I can say, here are the options, and you must pick from one of the options that I have supplied. Closed-ended questions tend to be more amenable to, analysis, quantitative analysis, because they're more structured, right? Open-ended questions allow the users to supply whatever answer comes from their mind. But the fact that it's open-ended doesn't mean that it cannot be analyzed quantitatively. So that's what we want to make sure we get that clear. You can have an open-ended question that is still amenable to quantitative analysis. And so, for example, I might say, what is your income, or what is your monthly income, or how many visits did you make to a dentist last year? And leave it as open-ended, but put some constraints in the kind of answers that are allowed, right? So that I don't have to worry about data cleaning later on. We're going to show some of this in a minute. And then Likert scales. We're going to use Likert scales. How many points do we want to have on that scale? Should it be ascending or should it be descending? In general, in English language, at least, we tend to read from left to right. And so scales too should mimic that behavior. Scales should generally rise from left to right. In other words, they should increase. So, and whatever scale we have decided, we need to be consistent with it. You can't have one question scale that is ascending, and then the next question you have scales that are descending, because the user already has short-term memory. They have remembered that question one, I had the scale was, very likely, very unlikely, somewhat likely, very likely. They've already memorized that pattern, that this is an increasing scale. Then the next question, you now confuse them by bringing the reverse of that scale, that direction. That's extremely confusing. So make sure you stick to one scale. In general, in English language, we read from left to right, like I said. In other languages, it's the reverse. So the choice of ascending or descending scales should fit the context. Cognitive interviews, how many people to use for cognitive tests? In the federal government, generally we try to stick below 12 people, because 12 is a magic number beyond which you have to get approval from, for the conduct of national service, the OMB process. So generally we stick to 9 people or less. But that's the decision you have to make, and that could be driven by incentives. If you're taking people's time, you obviously have to pay them for their time. Do you have money for incentives and all of that? And then survey administration. How are you going to administer the survey? Is it going to be by phone, in person? Will it be by mail? Will it be paper-based surveys? Will it be electronic surveys? And then ethical considerations. Compensation. If you're going to take people's time, if it's going to be a long survey, do you want to compensate them for their time? Are there privacy concerns that we need to be worried about? Are you collecting data that are either identifying or potentially identifying? So identifiers could be things like your name or your age, so your name or your any other things that directly identifies you, your email, your phone number, your address, right? Your geo coordinates, latitudes and longitudes. I mean, if you have somebody's latitudes and longitudes, you know where they live, apparently. All of those things are direct identifiers. But then you also have to worry about potential identifiers. These are not direct identifiers, but they're things that if you put 1 and 2 together, you can figure out quickly what they are. So you go to let's say an institution that is predominantly Black or predominantly white, and you ask for race, and the one white guy or the one Black guy says, this is my race. Of course, in that context, you can identify them just by that race, even though in other contexts, race may not be an identifier. And so the same thing applies to age, to extremes of age. You ask for age and somebody says, oh, I'm 150 years old. Well, guess what? In the whole city, they're the only person who's 150 years old. So that's why for extremes of age, you want to truncate values. So for example, you could say values above 80 years old will be truncated together in one category, so that you don't want to identify people directly or indirectly. And then you also want to funnel questions. Funneling is an approach where we have questions that are broad questions. The funnel, look, if you look at the funnel, the top of the funnel is very broad, and as you go down the funnel, it becomes narrow and narrower. So broad questions should be, should be at the top. Questions that we all can agree that are not sensitive. How old are you? Where do you live? Which country do you live? If you're going to ask questions about, oh, what's your sexual orientation? Well, you want to put that at the bottom of the funnel, right? Because that's a very invasive question. That is a very narrow question. And, so funneling of several questions means you want to pay attention to the sensitivity of the questions, put broad items at the top and narrow items at the bottom of the funnel. All right, so that's all we have for the lecture. If there are any questions, I will take them, and then we can do some hands-on demo to see how you can address different components of what we've discussed on the platform. So Lungle, do we have questions?
Not yet, sir.
All right. Do we have anybody who has volunteered a questionnaire?
There's a questionnaire, there's a link.
All right, let's see.
It was posted earlier.
All right, let's see. Let me pull it up. I think there's a hand raised.
Yes, I'm unmuting people.
Okay, sure.
Acronym.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. This is very, very inspiring and enlightening. But I have a question on pilot testing. Before now, academically, I was taught that you pilot test, or yes, you pre-test a tool or an aspect of a research, like an equipment or a questionnaire like we're talking about, but you pilot test the entire study on a small scale. But I think I'm hearing something different today. I don't know whether that is, do I on should I say undo what I learned before? Please just I need a clarification here. Thank you.
Okay. So there are two terms that are sometimes conflated. And again, sometimes in some cases you could pilot and do cognitive testing at the same time. So instead of trying to bury ourselves in semantics, I'll just explain the broader principles. So especially in the context of large surveys, like large national surveys, we obviously want to make sure that we don't pour down millions of dollars down the drain and then realize that, oops, there were issues. So cognitive testing is a process. It's a very qualitative process where we administer the questionnaire, right, to participants. And then we are it's called cognitive testing because we're trying to see what was going on in their brains when they were thinking about this question. That's why it's called cognitive testing. What was the state of your cognition? What were you thinking when you answered? So I give you the questionnaire, you take the questionnaire, and then I'll come back to you and we're going to have a chat. I'm going to ask you, okay, question one, what were you thinking when you answered when you read this question? What came to your mind, right? Again, cognitive testing. I'm trying to see what was going on in your mind at the time you answer, or even now when you read that question, what comes to your mind? So this is what happens with cognitive testing, and it's a back and forth between me and each of the participants. So I may have just like 9. I don't need a whole lot of people, and it's not even logistically feasible to go and do cognitive testing on 100 people, because it's a very intensive process where I'm trying to understand each individual state of mind when they read a question and what they understand. So it's a real investment of time and effort and money too, because you have to compensate these people. The amount of time someone takes to do cognitive testing with you is more than just it's more than just answering the questionnaire and just going. Because now you've answered the questionnaire, and now we're going to have a chat where I want to really understand everything from your own mind frame. Everything is from your perspective. It doesn't matter what I had in mind. That's not the issue here. The issue is, what did you think when you answered the question, right? And so it's a very intensive procedure where we take all of this information and then we would then finalize the instrument based on all the feedback. Because remember, the goal is that each question must be understood the exact same way by everybody. So we have a problem on our hands if Mr. A told me that when he reads this question, this is what he understands. And that's not what Mr. B told me. And that's definitely not what Mr. C told me. The goal is, how do you create a question that is valid and that every single person understands the exact same way? So the only way we can do that is to go through this iteration and refine the questionnaire until the point where everybody so that when I ask you, what did you understand when you read this question, I get the same answer. It is then and only then that we can declare that we have a finalized questionnaire, right? And so if we're going to do a study, or even a pilot study, which is still a study, we cannot do it without an instrument that is finalized. The goal of a pilot study should not really be to go and test your instrument. That is a waste of resource, because even the pilot study is expensive to conduct, right? The pilot study is almost as good as a real study. So that is not a space for you to go and be saying, oh, I want to test my instruments. I want to see what their response is. No. You have missed that. You have skipped an entire step where you should have done cognitive testing on your instrument. The goal of a pilot study is to test feasibility of a study. Is this study logistically feasible, right? Which is quite a different question we're trying to ask of when we do cognitive testing. Cognitive testing is simply saying, cognitively, does this instrument work? Does it make sense? Pilot testing is all about assessing the feasibility and logistics. So there are different things, but again, somebody might choose to do all of them at the same time. Sure, but traditionally, the way we do it in large surveys is we do cognitive testing, and if need be, we then take that cognitively tested instrument, and then we pilot it to see whether, one, response rates, how are the response rates with this survey? How are the completion rates? How are the patterns of those are more interesting issues that we're trying to assess on that instrument. So the questions we're asking are quite different when we do cognitive testing in general versus when we do pilot testing. That quite different issues we're trying to assess. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Okay, there's another question. Could you please explain further the concept of incentivizing participants for their time?
Well, if it's the same reason why you pay the salaries. Somebody takes your time for work, and you have to pay them. So it's not some super complex explanation. It's going to take me for a long questionnaire that is like 50 questions. It's going to take me at least 2 hours to maybe takes the individual 30 minutes to answer the questions, and then it takes them maybe an hour to go through all the questions. Well, if somebody's spending 2 hours, maybe you won't pay them. So it's not about it's not some scientific reason. It's just that this person has spent 2 hours with you. You should pay them for their time.
Thanks. Joseph?
Thank you, Prof. Are you hearing me?
Clearly, yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
I hear you clearly.
Thank you very much. Really, I enjoy your lecture. I have a question. When you were talking the other time, you talk about often, very often, a questionnaire with the scale like often, very often, and this and that. Are you saying it's not good for research, or we should not use it to collect data? So I didn't get your message clear there.
Right. Let me explain. What I was saying was that you can have you can't compare apples to oranges. Apples have to go with apples, and oranges have to go with oranges. So in the case here, let me see. Okay, I think this is what we're talking about here. The question is, how big is the risk? This is the question stem. The response option is talking about frequency. Big is an indicator of magnitude, right? Magnitude, how big?
Size, yeah.
The size. Frequency is how to do with time.
Yes.
So you're talking about size, magnitude in the question versus frequency. Here we have a combination of apples and oranges. There's apples in the stem, but oranges in the response options. That doesn't make any sense. If you have apples in the stem, you must have apples in the response options.
Yes,
do you understand?
yes.
So I'm not saying that I'm not by any means saying that this is wrong.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that this is wrong. Well, this is wrong. This one obviously leading the participants. But what I'm saying is that if you're going to have one indicator in the stem, it must be the same in the response options too.
Response options. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Can I check the reliability score of the questionnaire?
You can, but the reliability score is it's you shouldn't rely too much on what any software or any individual tells you is the score. It's very easy to just pass something through anything and it tells you, oh, this is the score. More important than that is you understanding on a very basic level what the principles are and why the particular question might be wrong, right? So again, all you need is understanding what principles make a question good or bad. And at that point, you don't even need any person telling you this is the score. You can make those decisions as a scientist and say, this question has so and so issues, and this is how I'm going to correct it.
Thank you. Is cognitive testing carried out for qualitative studies?
You can do cognitive testing for any kind of instrument, right? Because even for qualitative studies, you might have a guide. You have a guide that you need to collect from people. It can be structured or it could be semi-structured, but you are still collecting information from people. You are still asking them questions. So the principle here is, if we're asking the question, we must ask the same question of everybody. Because remember that for anything to be researched, it must be systematic. Systematic simply means that we are doing the same thing over and over. We're doing the same thing to this person and that person and that person. That is what systematic means in the context of research. So it is no longer systematic if I ask Mr. A this question and ask Mr. B a different question. That's no longer research, because it has lost the element of being systematic. So the whole point of cognitive testing, in a nutshell, is to make sure that our research is systematic and that every single person is being assessed the same question.
Thank you. Oyeyemi?
Okay, good day, everyone. Good day, Prof. Thank you very much for this enlightening lecture. Please, I just want to find out about maybe seeking retrospective ethical approval. Imagine someone takes part in maybe a screening exercise and you collect some data. Eventually, you decide that, oh, this is worth, maybe publishing. If you've collected the data already, you probably didn't have in mind that something that's worth, publishing, but all of a sudden, you just saw maybe some data and you feel that, yes, let's put it together as a manuscript. Is it ethical to just publish that without, or you still have to go and collect ethical approval after you have collected the data? Thank you. Over.
Sure. So I'm just curious how the data were even collected in the first place. Because it almost seems that we just randomly collected data from them without any due process, right? So that is more of a red flag in that scenario, that we should have, if it was originally intended for research, then we should have collected data from them, right? So there are two ways to go about this. One is think of publicly available data where data already exists. So let's say you're interested in cholesterol research. You are interested, you do research on obesity and you're interested in the relationship between, cholesterol levels and, let's say, stroke. And you're trying to use data from NHANES. NHANES is a publicly available data set. You just go to NHANES website, download the data set. NHANES already went through ethical review process before they collected the data. And so that data were collected. It's publicly available, but there was an already set process for obtaining ethical review for that data set you're already accessing. Now, in this case, what you are using is no longer deemed as human subject research, because it is de-identified, publicly available existing data set. There's no indicator. So it was from human beings, but it's still deemed as non-human subject research, because there is nothing in that data set that identifies anybody in the real world to that data set, right? It's completely linked. You still have to go through a waiver. Most journals will require that you still have to get through it is not you that deems the research as non-human research. It is an IRB or an ethical review board that will deem the study as non-human subject. So, because this is something that you see all the time, people will say, oh, we deem the study as non-human subject. I'm like, no, it's not your right to deem it such. An ethical review board is the one that will deem it and give you a waiver. So a waiver simply means that the ethical review board has deemed that you don't have to go through the whole process of an ethical approval. They have waived that whole process for you because they have decided that your research is non-human subject. So that decision is not yours to make. It belongs to the ethical review boards. In your own scenario, it's a bit different because it seems that the original data collection was not even covered by an ethical approval to start with. So in this case, yes, I would say that if you have that kind of data, you want to go back and get approval. Now, in other contexts, like sometimes we collect data, it had IRB approval at the beginning, and we told participants that we want to use your data for A, B, and C. And then we collected data, and let's say we collected some biomarkers, let's say blood or or saliva from them. We kept them in the freezer, and then later on we're like, geez, there's this new, technology that allows us to assess for some new, some metabolite, and now we want to do X, Y, and Z with that data. Remember, we told them we're going to do A, B, and C. Well, we have to go back and get consent from them again, right? It's not enough to just go get an ethical approval. We need to go back and get consent. Imagine I gave you a blood sample, or you took a sample of a cell, and now you want to do some genetic analysis. And no, I did not give you consent to use that for, objectives X, Y, and Z, when you told me that you were going to use it for A, B, and C. So in this case, it's not enough to just go to an ethical board and say, just rubber stamp approval for us. Oh, you have to go back to those participants and get consent from every single one of them, because you told them you're going to use their data for A, B, and C, but now you have decided to use it for X, Y, and Z. And so that is those two things are not the same. So it gets very complicated. It depends on the risks involved. It depends on what kind of things you are trying to look at. And so it's never a black and white answer. It is just always very, very, very contextual.
Thank you, sir. Can someone sideline demographic information in a questionnaire?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you read again, please? Can someone do what?
Sideline. Mm-hmm.
So I want to understand that to mean, can somebody have a questionnaire without including demographic information? Yeah, everything is possible, but the question is, why would you want to do that? Remember that we talked about unmeasured confounding. Unmeasured confounding is you're trying to look at the relationship between smoking and tooth loss, for example, in your data set. But there are confounders. Confounders are simply variables that inject noise into the relationship. Or you can think of confounders as alternative explanation. So you might say that people who smoke are more likely to lose their teeth. But it could also be that, people who smoke are also more likely to be X, Y, and Z, right? So it's not necessarily smoking that is making them lose their teeth. It's those other things that are associated with smoking. Now, the question is, how are you going to control? If you're interested in just that relationship, the truth, you have to control for all these other variables, including demographic variables. So the question then is, if you decided to ignore or sideline or not collect data on demographics, how then do you adjust for that? This is why I was saying that you must have an analysis plan before you collect data, right? And if you are a supervisor, your students must have an analysis plan before they collect the data, because that is what will allow you to ensure that, okay, your plan is to analyze the relationship between X and Y. Have you given thought to confounders? What are the confounders you have in mind? Oh, but your questionnaire does not have any of those confounders. So is it magic? Like, how are you planning to adjust for those variables when you collect the data? Or is it when you collect the data, you don't come to me and tell me, oops, we did not collect data on the demographics? So that is why you have to have an analysis plan. And that's why this is why you are a supervisor. If you're a supervisor, that's your job, to make sure that you review the analysis plan and make sure that the things that ought to be collected are in the questionnaire, so that you don't have an issue of medicine after death.
Thank you. Adewale?
Yes, sir. Thank you, doctor. Please, sir, I want to ask based on cognitive testing. Now, in a survey whereby I have like 300 participants, is there a standard number of people to be selected from this 300 for my cognitive testing? I don't know if you understand my question, sir.
I do. So don't worry too much about the nuances of how many people do I need. Worry more about what are we trying to achieve, right? So the question is, what are we trying to achieve? We're simply trying to achieve a scenario where everybody reads the questionnaire and it makes sense to them and they all understand the exact same thing from the questionnaire, right? So again, so the goal is not to have a large study. The goal is just to make sure that people understand, and and the reason why we don't want to go back to the same individuals over and over, because they already have been sensitized to the questionnaire. And so in general, like in federal service, when I was at CDC, we typically would do cognitive testing on less than 9 people, right? So if you want a number, okay, let me give you a number. 9 people, that's more than enough. 5, there's no hard number, right? It doesn't have to be a huge crowd of people, but what we just really want to focus on is, why are we doing it? So I think it's imperative that we always try to focus more on this stuff we're even doing. Like, why are we doing it in the first place? Because I think sometimes we do a lot of procedures without even understanding the rationale for why they are being done or what we're even trying to get out of it. So in that case, then that defeats the entire purpose, because we don't know what we're doing, and even if we detected things, we don't even know what is supposed to be done. So so let's not worry about the numbers. It doesn't have to be a huge crowd. It could be 5 people, it could be 3 people, it could be 4 people. You decide, but the goal is to achieve a scenario where questionnaire is clear and unambiguous and everybody understands the exact same thing from it. One way to also address this is you can use questions that have already been pre-tested already, right? This particularly applies when you created the questions yourself from scratch. Now you have to test them to make sure that they're working and that they're validated. So you can use questions that have already been pre-validated or pre-tested, right? That reduces that need or that burden. Now, it doesn't mean that it eliminates the need completely, because a question that was tested in the US doesn't mean that people in Nigeria or where you are may understand it fully. It's all about everything is about context. So the context might determine that, well, this instrument has already been pre-tested, but I think I still need to test it again among my population because I don't think they're going to understand it. So it's not one of those things we can just make. It's you are the researcher, you understand the context, so you should feel comfortable making some decisions. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about context. Right. Any other question?
Good afternoon, Doctor. Thank you so much for the teaching. Hello, sir.
I can hear you clearly, yes.
Okay. Actually, my own is what I'm passing through right now. I'm actually not taking my PhD program, and I'm looking at the socio-economic determinants of child labor in Southwest Nigeria. Fortunately, let me use the word fortunately and unfortunately, I even did my post-feed yesterday. I actually went to the Southwest. I did my own together with some other people in Lagos State, while I employ some other people in that is in Osun State and Oyo State. One of the things I discovered while I was doing that thing, it was so difficult that many people, when they see strangers coming to their environment, they frown at it. So at the end of the day, what I resorted to is just to use the people in that locality, that they are aware that their own children also engage in child labor, so that it's going to be a trap for them. In fact, I discovered that some of the people that I even employed, they were lying to them that, don't worry, government want to do something for us. Don't be afraid. It was later I got to know that, especially in Lagos State. So where am I heading to? Like, I look at 4 variables. I look at unemployment among the parents, if it can influence child labor. I also look at low income. I also look at parental education and this household dependency, among others control variables, demographic characteristics, I even carry out all those ones. But I discovered when I was presenting my work yesterday, during my post-feed, majority of the people that I administered the questionnaire, they were employed. They did not see being working with government as only when you are, that is only when you are employed. People that do their own work, they see themselves as they are working, they are employed. So at the end of the day, the majority of the people that I attended today were working. And they were like tackling me yesterday when I was doing my post-feed that you talk about unemployment, but unfortunately, I actually administered that, but they were employed, and they were tackling me, and it looked as if as if I don't know where I was. So my question is this: that's number one. Number two, because there are 6 states in Southwest, I picked 3 states. And in this state, I picked 3 local government. And in each local government, I picked 4 words. And each 4 words, I picked 33 using this Korean sampling method that you can use when the population is unknown. So, and they were like, what is the rationale behind me choosing that three states? And honestly speaking, because of that, they almost stepped down my work yesterday. So I want to ask, if you are doing such a thing and there is no actually, you can't cover the whole 6 states, and for the convenience and because of the financial implication, do you need to give reason for selecting those 3 states? Number one. And number two, that one that I actually administer questionnaire, but my respondents, many of them, they are working and they're not unemployed among them. But unemployment is among my variable. Does it make that work relatively useless? Let me not use the word completely useless. These are my questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I empathize with you, first of all. Since you had a very terrible day yesterday. All right, having said that, there are ways we can go around addressing those issues. So for next time, you want to make sure that you include, because your population, the issue here is that you're comparing apples to oranges, right? Your study population by your admission is people who are unemployed, but you end up with people who are employed. So this is apples to an apples to orange situation here. What you should have done is to create your questionnaire in such a way that you define that population clearly. So let me show you what I'm referring to. So I'll go through some of the elements we've talked about in the platform so that you know how to use them to avoid such issues next time. So let me highlight some of the issues we've covered and how to address them. And in so doing, we're going to answer your questions. So let me quickly log in and demonstrate some of those issues we talked about to ensure that your study is, let me close some of this. All right, so first things first, we'll talk about the issue of the language, making sure that your survey is has a good readability level. So like I said earlier, to assess that one, you come here to settings, the information icon, that survey info. This tells you whether your survey is fairly difficult or is simple. You want to make sure that your survey is simple because people have to read the survey, they have to understand the survey. So that's the first thing that you can use there. Nextly, we talked about ensuring that questions are mutually exclusive and that you prevent order effects. Order effect is when questions at the top are more likely to be answered than those at the bottom. Let me show you how to address that. And for the last person who asked a question, we're going to come to your question in just a second. So let's create a question that mimics what this person asked, and let us see how you could have, what practical steps you could have done to make sure that those issues were addressed. So let's go to Excel and let's create a question from Excel. So to make sure that this is how you could have, this is what you could have done to make sure that people who were not employed or people who were employed didn't end up in your survey. So let's do that. And before we do that, I also must address that if all you wanted to do was cognitive testing, you didn't have to travel all the way across oceans and lands to cognitive test. Cognitive testing is inherently an exercise of convenience. You test the questionnaire with things you have around you. You should never have to go and for thousands of miles to just go and test an instrument. There are people around you. You just grab them and test the instrument. It's not supposed to be this complicated process, right? It's just a necessary process to make sure that our instrument it makes sense. So next time, again, just use what you have around you to test it. So for that, your research question, for example, it could be family members, it could be friends, it could be neighbors, right? Let them read and let them provide feedback to improve the question. So that is one thing we should want to keep in mind. So here, let's say your survey was titled, let's create that in and see analysis of, well, let me just create that directly in the platform to save time. Let's say your title was assessment of attitudes and practices towards child labor among Nigerian adults. So that's your topic. And this is Nigeria. The aims, let's generate with AI. Right, so these are some of the aims that have been suggested by the AI to assess the prevalence of child labor among Nigerian adults and identify potential risk factors. Let's add that. Let's see. To explore the socioeconomic factors, since you're interested in individuals who are unemployed. So let's include that. And then let's just add one more. To analyze the relationship between income levels and the use of child labor by Nigerian adults. So let's add that as well. So now we have our aims. Let's clear this once away. Our keywords, let's add child labor prevalence. Let's add socioeconomic. And of course, you're interested in regional variances. So let's add that as well. Let's clear the remaining ones away. And then let's create our project. So this is how we set up our project. You add your collaborators if you want to. I'm not interested in that for now. Let's keep that. Now, your problem here is that in your pilot study, you ended up with a whole bunch of people who were not supposed to participate, but they somehow participated. So you could have prevented that by including a question that indicates what the study population is. So here, for example, let's say that the inclusion criteria for your study was persons who are aged 18 years or older and who are unemployed. Let's see how you could have done that. Add a blank survey. Let's add a question on age. Let's use an open-ended question, a single value text question. Let's say, how old were you last December 31st? How old were you on December 31st of last year? Please enter the number in years in the box below. So again, remember we said that every question must have 3 elements. It must have the question stem itself, it must have the instruction, and it must have the answer. Here, this is our question. How old were you on December 31st of last year? Why am I adding those details? If I say, how old are you? Well, some people are going to tell me their age at their last birthday. Some people are going to tell me their age in their upcoming birthday. And I'm going to get a whole mix of responses, some of which are, I might end up comparing apples to oranges. So how do I solve that? I have to make sure, it's my job to make sure that everybody reading that question understands it the exact same way. So in this case, I just have solved that by just saying, December 31st of last year, how old were you? So everybody has the exact same time reference to evaluate their age, right? It's not subjective where somebody decides that, well, I'm going to tell you my age, my last birthday, and the next guy says, I'm going to tell you my age, my upcoming birthday. It's a fixed time point. And then this is the question. Then this is the instruction. Please enter the number in years in the box below. I don't want some guy who will calculate his age in months and say I was 2,456 months old. No, I want the answers in years, right? So that's how I can prevent that, you know. And so in this case, I also want to make sure that participants provide the answers as numbers. This is an open-ended question, but I also don't want to waste my time cleaning data later on. So I want to come back here to the settings and say, allow only numbers, so that if you try to enter something that is not a number, it should not accept it. The same thing here. I don't want anybody entering -5 years old mistakenly, right? So the minimum value you can have is 0. I don't want to allow a maximum, you know, I don't want to impose a maximum, so I'm going to allow any maximum. But I can also impose a maximum. I can say, well, any number above 150 is not realistic. So if you enter 150 years old, or, you know, any number above that, it's like, no, that is not realistic, you know. So in this case, I have created my question. I've tried to make sure that it's not biased by making sure that everybody understands the exact same way. I have allowed only numbers to make sure that if you try to put letters, it will not accept it. And I've imposed minimum and maximum values. I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to call this age, right? This is one way of creating it. I can push the questionnaire now. So remember in our presentation, we said you have to decide what kinds of questions to select. Should you leave an open-ended question, or do you want to create a closed-ended question? In this case, this is an open-ended question with upper and lower limits. So individuals are forced to select an item from in between a range. I could also create that same question, but ask the different way. Let's say as drop-down menus. So in this case, if I wanted to use a drop-down menu question, for example, I could say single response question, but this time I'm using drop-down menus. And I can say how old, the same question, but created in different ways. So you have the rights and, you know, to decide how you want to frame the questions. How old were you on December 31st of last year? So please select one answer. But again, regardless of the question, you always want to provide instructions. So please select one answer. Can that person please mute themselves? So let's say age 2. In this case, I want to use explore to type in the lower and the upper limits for the age I want. And so I can say 1900. So in this case, I might ask, when were you born? That's another way of asking that same question. When were you born? Or in what year? So in this case, I can say the 1900 to 2024, right? And so the platform will automatically fill in the values. Obviously, you don't want to sit down here and start typing 1901, 1902. Nobody has that kind of time. So you just provide the lower limits and upper limits. And when you look at the question, the platform would automatically fill in the values for you. So the question then becomes, in what year were you born? Please select one answer from below, and then the participant will then select that value. And then we can then add to questionnaire. So you can select, you can create questions in however way you want. Now, for the case of the person who asked the last question, what you ought to have done was to add a question on, let's say, on employment status. That would say, let's add that. Which of the following best describes? So, which of the following best describes your employment status? Please select, again, question, instruction, answers. Please, every question must have those 3 components: the question stem, the instruction, and then the answers. This is the question stem. This is the instruction. Please select the best fitting answer from below. And then let's call this employment. Now the options will be I am not employed at the moment. I'm not looking for a job. Again, this is not fixed. I'm just for illustration purposes only. I'm not looking for a job. I am unemployed and looking for a job. I work for the government. I work for myself, self-employed. Okay, I work at a private company. And then, response options must be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Collectively exhaustive means that there has to be, whatever an individual does, they must have an answer there for them. So to do that, you always use the other option. You should provide an other option. So you click on other, and you can say some other job not listed here, or some other work not listed here, right? Please specify, so that when they provide that, they now provide the answer that aligns with that. So in this way, every single thing that anybody will have to answer is captured, because even if it's not captured in any of those ones, well, it's captured here, right? And so we'll push that to questionnaire. You can always preview it to see how it's going to look like. Which of the following best describes your employment status? If they select this one, then the system will say enter value, right? Because this is a very special button. The order we added here, it automatically knows that regardless of what you type here, the system will allow you then to type an answer once you select that. Now, we also said initially that sometimes you might want to make sure that if there are a lot of options, you want to randomize them. So here, if you come to the settings here, you have the option to keep all options, responses fixed, shuffle all responses, and fix some, shuffle others. So remember we said in a scenario where you have a lot of options, the order might influence the answer people give. So in that case, you might want to shuffle the answers so that you don't have some answers that are fixed at the top or fixed at the bottom. So in this case, I would like to shuffle some. This is not a very long list, but for the sake of demo, let me say I want to fix some, but shuffle others. I want this other one to always be last. So I'm going to keep this one last, but all the other ones will be shuffled. So let's apply that. So you can see that this is anchor. This is an anchor icon that shows that this is going to be last position all the time. So we're going to apply this. So it will always be last, but all the other ones will be shuffled. That is how you address issues of order effects. And now we can add that to our questionnaire. And so now we've created our question. So what you should have done then was to have created a inclusion criteria. So you come to logic, and you come to inclusion criteria. Inclusion criteria determines who gets to be in your survey and who gets to be excluded. So let's say inclusion criteria there. Let's set up criteria with age and with this, right? So done selecting. So if age is greater than 18 years old and employment is exactly equal to, or if we wanted to use, in this case we have age, and there's no limit to number of variables that you can use, right? You can jolly well also choose to use the drop-down menu question. We created 2 variables here. Either of them work very well. So in this case, if employment we want to include people only if they are not employed at the moment. So if employment is containing any of I am not employed at the moment, or I am unemployed and looking for a job, and age is less than 2007. That means that they are older than 18 years old. Those are the people we want to include in our study, right? So when we submit that, this is just statements that will be displayed if people are eligible or not eligible. So here you have set your inclusion criteria. So people would naturally and automatically be filtered out if they are not eligible. So if, for example, you are taking a survey, let's preview this, and we come to start the survey. This is just telling us that we have eligibility set up in the survey. And how old were you December 31st of last year? You put 12 years. This is the question we're using. In what year were you born? If you say you were born in 2021 and you work at a private company, so it's evaluating the logic, you're not eligible to participate, right? So if people are either too young, people have to meet the criteria for participation, meaning that they have to be unemployed and they have to be 18 years or older. So this is what you missed doing. You did not set up inclusion criteria. If I might ask, what did you use to collect data? What platform did you use to collect data? Because most platforms should have that capability. Is the person who has the question still available?
Yes, thank you, sir. I use the Google form. Actually, like my field officer, this is what I asked them, and this is what I did. We are asking them questions directly because the questionnaire was administered on both the household head and the children. So
Okay.
now when they now ask, when we interact with them, we ask them questions, and they will now fill it, or I fill it, and it will be transformed. You not be I will not get it as in electronically, but we ask them.
I
We do
understand
the
you.
ask.
So the moral of the story is that if you're doing research, Google Form is not built for research. Google Form is an awesome tool for if you want to organize a party and you want to do some small thing. Google Form is not designed to do research. If you're doing research, you should use tools that are designed for research, right? Google Form doesn't have, for example, capabilities for you to define inclusion criteria. So the problem is that you then end up with scenarios where you have people who are not supposed to be in your data, but are in your data because the platform you're using has no capacity to enforce logic. So next time you're doing research, I would recommend that you use a platform that has capability for that is designed for research. That would solve all of the problems that you've mentioned. So those are problems that were largely, not even largely, completely avoidable with proper design of the instrument. Now, regarding your other question about how to select, yeah, you don't have to. The whole point of sampling is that we don't have to go to every single element and select them, right? We can sample. So there's nothing wrong with sampling. There's also nothing wrong with doing a convenient sample. We don't want to live with this mindset that, oh, for it to be good research, it has to be random, or it has to. No. We can do convenience sample, but the issue is, what is our intention? Do we have intentions to generalize our results beyond the study population? If there is no such intention, then we don't have to even worry about sampling and all of that, right? But if there is now an intention to generalize, then we have to implement random sampling. So I'm just emphasizing that because it is more important for us to understand why we do the things we do than just do them just mechanically, because this is how it's done. We need to understand, like, from first principles, why is it that we're even doing these things, right? What is the intention? It boils down to what is the intention behind the research, right? So if you want to sample, the platform allows you, the Chisquares platform, allows you to sample. You just come to sampling. And in your case here, you'll upload a sampling frame. So the 6 states you have, what you could have done is draw out all of the local government areas across the 6 states into a spreadsheet like this. So you have let's say you have a spreadsheet with 2 columns, local government area and population size. So you have A, B, C, D, and all of that. And then in the second column, you have the population sizes, 1, 2, 3, 4, accordingly, right? So all the 6 states you are interested in, you list out all of their local government areas because you're interested in doing cluster sampling, right? And once you're done with that, you will upload that spreadsheet here and select PPS sampling with probability proportional to size, right? Here, the measure of size variable, you select column B, which is the population size. And, here, where am I? Here, you're going to select number of clusters you can reach. Maybe you end up with 45 local government areas, and you can only go to 10 of them. In that case, you select 10, all right? The platform will then automatically draw the local government areas for you, right? So in your case, it seems that you wanted to do random sampling, that you then chose, oh, I want to go here and here and here. Well, that's no longer random sampling because you chose where you wanted to go. If it's random sampling, then you can't choose. It has to be selected for you by an algorithm, automatically. So it's like you had the desire to do random sampling, but the way it was implemented was not random sampling. So that's another issue. So the issue is not whether you could sample from a list. That's not an issue. You don't have to go to all 6 states, right? The issue is that you are using your definition of cluster. There are 2 things that are wrong with your approach. Your definition of clusters is too big. You're using the whole state as a cluster. You have to come down smaller. You have to use the local government areas as clusters, right? Because then you will have more local government areas and your estimates will be more valid. So that's number one. Your choice of clusters was just too big. 6 states, and you're using the states as clusters. Then number 2, you had an intention to do random sampling, but the selection of states appeared to be not at random. You chose them yourself. So in this case, this is the approach you should have done. Listed all the local government areas across the 6 states, listed all their population size, and then performed PPS sampling, sampling with probability proportional to size, which is actually a self-weighting process. The way PPS sampling works is, let me show you with the data we already have on the ground. Let's say I want to do a sampling for, let's say, Nigeria as a whole, as a country. I select the country. If I'm interested in a sample of a state, I can select that, right? But if I'm interested in a national sample, I can leave that field blank. We use local government areas as clusters. So in any country of the world, we use the second administrative unit as clusters. So in Nigeria, that would be states and local government areas. In the US, that would be states and then counties as the second level. The platform automatically tells you how many of those you have available. And so let's say I wanted to select 30 counties from, this is Nigeria, 30 local government areas from Nigeria, and my sample size was 2,000 people, right? Once I click on get sample, the platform automatically tells me where I have to go. So it's not me saying that, oh, I want to go here and here. That selection is done completely at random. So that here in this case, for example, this is where I am told by the system that I have to go if my sampling will be representative. So again, just emphasizing that sampling itself was not wrong. It's the approach in which the sampling was done that could be improved.
Thank you so much, sir. But sir, apart from the Google form that I have done it before I realized that it's not the right thing. I've done it, I've come back from the West until I got some people telling me that is not the right thing for me to use. But apart from Chi-Square, which other one can somebody use for survey?
You can go do a Google search and see what tools you have available to you. You can also ask your supervisor what tools they might recommend. So that's a question that is best answered by you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions?
Yes. What would be a rigorous justification for adopting a convenient sampling method especially within a PhD program?
Any research question starts with what is your intention? So I think the problem is that we're always looking external, we're always looking outwards for some outward justification. But the justification is inward. The justification is what is your intention? What are you planning to do? That is the first thing, right? So it's not doing the research and asking somebody else, what is my justification? It's like, no, that question is for you. You're the one who has to answer that question. It's not a question that anyone else can answer but you. The justification for any non-probability sampling is that we don't have any intention to generalize beyond that population. So if there's intention to generalize, well, then you shouldn't do random, convenience sample. The sophistication of a question also is not based on so much on the, you could be doing a random sample, but your research question is completely just trivial. You could be doing, a non-probability sample, but your research approaches a very, very significant and impactful issue. So we cannot just judge the merit of a question or of an approach just based on how it was sampled. We have to know the devil is in the details. Like, it's all about context. So, so I can't say that, if it's a PhD, it has to be probability sample. No, that does not even make any sense. It's like, what are you contributing to society? Like, how does your research move the needle on things we care about, right? So again, it's all about starting from first principles. So let's not look outwards for saying what's the justification. The answer is inwards. Like, what was the intention to start with? I hope that is clear.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I'm just scrolling up to check other questions that were asked earlier. Is it mandatory to subject every tool or instrument to a reliability test? Again,
We want to get away from the culture of asking about absolutes. Absolute means we're asking for a rule that says you must do this. No such rules exist. Like we say, it's all about context. Does the context require that you subject your test to to cognitive testing? If the context says yes, then you should do it. If the context says no, and the whole point of the research, especially at the PhD level, is to train you so that you can make those determinations, right? So that you're not just blindly following rules that somebody else made, but you can say, no, this doesn't make sense in this context, or this makes sense in this context. So, so the answer is, yeah, it depends on the context. If the context calls for it, well, you should absolutely do it. If it doesn't call for it, then you should not do it.
In terms of Likert scale being in ascending order, does it mean I should start with the negative, strongly disagree, to positive, strongly agree? Please clarify the ascending order of scales.
Okay, so let's go back to the question let's sort by date created. Okay, so if we go back to let's create a Likert scale question, for example. Let's say the single response question Likert scale. How strongly, to what extent do you agree or disagree that, and again, this is how you make your questions neutral. Remember, we said we don't want to inject bias into our questions. So questions must be neutral. One way to frame questions as neutral is to say, in this case, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Notice I did not say, how much do you agree? It's like, oh, am I supposed to agree? Or how much do you disagree? No, make it neutral. To what extent do you agree or disagree that child labor is harmful to the child? Right? This is a poor question, but you get the point. The point is that you have to make your questions neutral. Every question must have three parts: the stem, the instruction, Please select one option from below. So the stem, the question, the stem, the instruction, and the answer. Every single question must have those three parts, right? So let's call this child. Now, here, let's look at the options we have here. Strongly agree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. So you see, they are rising from the negative to the positive. Why? Because we're speaking in English language. In English language, we write from the left to the right. Our number line also runs from the left to the right. You start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The negative numbers or the smaller numbers are always to the left in the English language and to the right on the number scale, right? That is consistently how things are framed in this language. So, well, it makes sense that your scale, again, this is not a rule, right? But it just makes sense that this is how we generally write. So that your scale rises from the left to the right. So in this case, strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. So you can then pick the scale you want. You can also choose to invert it, right? If I want to invert the scale, then strongly agree will now start from here. So it's your choice. You can choose however way you want to frame it, right? And you can choose to invert the scale with this button. You can choose to add color too. And that's another way you can also make it pop so that user knows. So if you choose to add color, then the colors are added. And of course, you can select whatever color you want. So I can apply that, but I can choose to change the colors if I want. Let's say I want strongly agree to be like a very positive thing. So let's say I want it to be the realm of green. I want a very, let's say, let's add green here. So strongly agree. And I want, let's say, agree to be a lighter shade of green. Let's pick that. Then neutral, I want neutral to be white. I want disagree to be, let's say, a bit of red. And I want strongly disagree to be maybe very bright red. So yeah, you can do anything you want, right? You can make it, but what we're saying is that be consistent. If you have chosen that you're going to make it from descending, like in this case, strongly agree to disagree, then all the questions should be that same pattern because the user has already, or the participant has already remembered that that's how the survey was framed, and then suddenly you're changing things on them. So be consistent in however you're going to do it. So in this case, the user sees it to what extent do you agree or disagree that child labor is harmful to the child. Please select one answer. They select the answer and then they can submit it. All right, next question, please.
Please enlighten me on selecting classrooms for a study in approved schools within Southeast Nigeria. How do I carry out random sampling thereof?
You generate a list of all the schools, all the classrooms. This is the exact same thing here. We're talking about classrooms. Have a spreadsheet of classrooms, 1, 2, or whatever the names of the classrooms are. You list them there. You come to sampling. You start new sampling. You select perform sampling, probably sampling on the sampling frame. The sampling frame simply means a spreadsheet. You select that. You select your spreadsheet. You select your sampling approach as simple random sampling, and you indicate the number of units you want to select from that spreadsheet. Let's say there are 200 classrooms and you want to select 20. Well, you select that, the platform will tell you, okay, here are the 20 classrooms that have been selected at random. So that's how you do it.
Thank you. Felix?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Please, I'm having a little issue with the AI tool. I know I raised the question yesterday, it was answered, but still I could not still use it because I want to try to practice it. It keeps on asking me that there must be a principal investigator. I've done everything I could, but it does still not allow me to submit anything, sir.
Okay, so role here, you come here and select principal investigator. So let's say, what's your topic?
Yeah, I am looking at the adoption of media messages on malaria.
Adoption of media messages on malaria in Nigeria.
Yes, through radio.
Okay. Okay, so that's the title. I'm just going to save time. I'm just going to paste the exact same thing there. Country is Nigeria.
Yes.
The research team. So here, right here, what you have to do is it says there must be exactly one principal investigator. So you just make sure that you come here, the principal investigator, PQR. So see, principal investigator, you select that. See, that error has disappeared. So make sure you select principal investigator. You know what? We're going to remove that stuff so that it stops giving you headaches. So we're going to remove
We appreciate it. We appreciate it, Prof. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right, sure. Sure, yeah,
Right.
we're going to do that. So we're going to start it from code.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Sir,
we good with the question? Okay, go ahead.
Is there a rationale behind removing neutral or undecided in the Likert scale?
Well, the Likert scale we have there gives you, let's go back to state created. So I didn't save the question. All right. So the Likert scale we have, let me go back to this. So you see the options, you have 4-point scale and 4-point scale we don't know and neutral. See, you have neutral, some of them have, it's now, we provide the tools, you have to know what you want to do, right? As an investigator, it is your job to know what has to be done. So it's not a rule that you must have a neutral. No, but it's everything is context. If I have a research question and I really want to make sure that I know this is a very polarized issue, and I don't want people if I ask a question that is controversial and everybody ended up selecting neutral, that is no longer research, because everybody has now selected one answer. There's no, for something to be a variable, well, it must vary. If all the people that I survey are answering neutral just to avoid controversy, then I have not collected any meaning. That data is completely nonsense because it does not vary. For something to be a variable, it must vary. So context will tell you that in this context, I'm going to remove neutral. And context will tell you that in this context, I have to add neutral. It is context dependent. So there's no, let us stop looking for rules that say, this is how you must do this, and this is how you must do that. Everything is governed by context.
Thank you. For marketing purposes, data analysis seems to be downplayed, making it appear as though the software lacks this capability. Data analysis is a key feature that many people prioritize, yet is currently placed under survey design. You might consider renaming survey design to survey design and data analysis if you prefer to maintain the current structure.
Thanks for your feedback. So we are releasing the full platform in the next few months, and the analysis. So of course, the Chisquares platform has capabilities for analysis, right? So if you do like I have an evaluation course, for example, I can choose to download analysis reports for people who answered the survey, so I can see, all right, what were their responses? How did they answer, right? And that's extremely useful because it allows me to get my data without having to do the manual analysis, because not everybody knows how to analyze data themselves, right? And even if they knew, not everybody has the time to sit down and start analyzing data. So having the ability to have a system automatically analyze your data is a good thing, right? It's definitely a value. But we are releasing full platform. Can we kindly mute ourselves, please? So the full platform we are releasing in a few months has a very, very sophisticated section that deals with not just descriptive analysis, but also multivariable analysis, right? And so that would be a feature we're going to release in in the next few months. So you want to watch out for that, because it goes beyond just descriptive analysis to issues of multivariable analysis as well.
Thanks, Prof. How does one go about simulation research?
That's a very broad question. Without context, I can answer that. Like, what do you mean by simulation research? What are you trying to simulate? So I need to know more context.
Okay. Is there a limit to the survey that we can use chi-squares for?
No.
All right. If there's any question that I skipped, please forgive me and kindly repost it right now. What does the SpiceNet framework stand for?
We explained it earlier, so you're going to review the slides later. But essentially, it's just an acronym that tells you what to think about in your survey. So here is the slide. Like, we're going to share the slides with you to review later on. So it's an acronym that simply stands for strategic assessment, planning, item development, control for quality, and evaluation.
Okay, thank you. The slides will be posted on our LinkedIn page shortly. So if you can give us an hour or so after the session. It seems there are no further questions.
All right, super. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you next week. All right, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Prof.
You're welcome.
Oh, there's a question.
Okay.
Can you throw more light of funneling?
So funneling essentially means that the way you have a funnel, it's broad at the top and narrow at the bottom. So you should ask things that are broadly acceptable, right? If you ask what year were you born, nobody has issues with that. It's a broad concept that applies. So the deeper your questionnaire goes, you can now drill down into deeper issues. So if my survey is about child labor practices, I don't want to ask question 1. Do you use your child does a child engage in child labor? Like, or really, like, this is quite a very, like, it's quite intrusive. So ask a broad question at the very top, and then as you go down, you want to go down to narrow issues, broad, more nuanced issues. That's what the funneling concept is all about. So it's just a way for you to position your questions in your questionnaire in a way that would make sense and reduce the number of people just terminating the survey earlier. At least if I ask a question that is invasive at the bottom, even if the user refuses to answer, at least I've captured their information on other things, right? So that's still a benefit there, as opposed to putting that invasive or sensitive issue in number 1, and then they say, you know what, I'm not even answering this questionnaire, and then I don't have any information from them at all. So it's a way of just placing our questions in a very strategic manner, so that the broad issues are at the top and the narrow issues are at the bottom.
Thanks, Prof. Those who are asking for the attendance link, it has been posted multiple times on the chat box. Kindly check, kindly scroll up. Thank you, Elia. Thank you, Neliswa. I think I saw Charles also helping with that. So people are really assisting to ensure that you all sign the register. So please just check on the chat box. Thank you. Someone has their hand up. Let me see. Isaac. Sorry, just a second. Okay, Isaac.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Gaku and the team. Can you hear me?
Clearly, we have hear you very well. Thanks.
Oh, okay. So I picked interest in the question on simulation. I understand your response because the question is actually without context. But just to help the person who asked the question have a clue, Basically, simulation research is about modeling, and it's mostly used in engineering and other science-related courses. For instance, in chemical engineering, where you want to see how certain chemical compounds will react to certain conditions. And with the use of, with the advent of evolution of AI, and especially if these use of computers are also deployed in very sophisticated laboratories, then one can actually hypothesize and see how the potential reality of a situation will look like if it actually occurs in outside of laboratory situation. So basically, it's something that gives an idea of what a real thing will look like. And basically, that's what it is all about, basically. So if you hypothesize that 1 + 2 in a certain mixture will give you this level of strength or this level of reaction, and you want to simulate it, it's similar to what we do, similar to virtual reality, really. But in this case, it's seeing how the computers help you understand. The use of computers to help you understand what a reality would look like, not what the reality is, but what it would possibly look like. So that's the vague idea. If there's context to it, like you rightly suggested, then the answer could be a lot more helpful. But I think the person asking the question may still at least gain some help with my response anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Some hands up. Are those old hands or new hands?
I think they're new hands.
Okay.
Isaac Joseph.
Hello.
Joseph.
Hello.
You can hear you clearly.
Yes, sir. Please, I can't get the link. I don't know, maybe it's network here. I can't get the link for register.
That would be shared, I guess. I guess. Can you check the history? I believe it has been pasted.
Okay. Okay.
You should check the chat.
Thank you. I
You're
can
welcome.
get it now.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks, Hawa. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Charles, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Prof. As always, I can't thank you enough. Facts. I don't know what to say than to say thank you again. What I wanted to point out is, can we? I don't know, I was keep using this. Can you put something in place to help people to know that some of the suggestions they have made after using the platform is kind of acknowledged, so they know. Like when they submit some kind of things that they feel should be on the platform, like in a way to say, this has been received or something like that.
Okay.
When someone goes to that feedback platform and sends something, it just goes and nothing shows that somewhere. Though I know it's somewhere, but can someone just get like a feedback to say, this is received or it's under review, or just to show that it also gives people that confidence that yes, perhaps somebody's looking at it, and that is one. Two, on the AI tool, which is my best part, I'm still yet to do my video anyways, is on the title is still only 100 characters, which for me is still very small. That's one. Two is on a request I also made on the feedback to say, can we have another app to say it's specific for concept notes for maybe PhD proposal, request or something like that. So those are my 2 or 3 feedback or comments. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much. So so the first one, yeah, that's good feedback. We'll add feedback to your feedback. So when you provide feedback, you get an automated and then sorry, I think I might have forgotten your first question, but yeah, the suggestions to add, we'll take all of the things you said and would work on them. So, but expect the toolkit is a beta product for now, right? We just released it in the beta mode so that it's by no means a completed product. It's still an experimental product. But as the weeks roll by, we are putting a lot of effort to refining it so that when we release the final version, it serves its intended purpose. But for now, it's just an early release to just have our community engage with it and get their thoughts and reactions. And yes, every feedback you provide is looked into. So yeah, thanks very much for your thoughts.
There's suddenly so many hands.
I was
Abimbola.
that observation. Like the number of hands are rapidly increasing.
They saw you leave and they were like, no.
Hello, Prof.
Too early.
Hello, yes.
Abimbola.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Can hear you clearly.
I'm sorry, please. Can I just add something I missed, Prof?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So the last thing I forgot to mention was when you want to copy from the content generated, it gives you almost the same framework or display that you see on the web. But when you download, it's kind of mesh things together, like mesh the words in sections together, not the way it's properly outlined when you are looking at it on the platform or when you want to copy and paste. When you copy and paste, you get almost the same feeling like what you see on the site. But when you download, it's kind of mesh things together. So perhaps is there any way we can also make it that when you download, it also gives you the same feel that you can see like one sees when you're looking at it on the web? Over.
Yeah, thank you. So like I said, it's an experimental product. It's far from finished. So of course you're going to expect and those are non-issues. So we're going to resolve all those issues. But for now it's just a product we put out there for experimental reasons. And as we work on the beta, yeah, those are non-issues that we'll definitely address. But thanks for your feedback.
Abimbola.
Good afternoon, Ma. Good afternoon, sir. And good afternoon, everybody. Now, my question, can you hear me?
Clearly, yeah, we can hear you clearly, yes. Okay.
My question is a kind of, I would like to call it an AOB regarding what's the topic you have for today, but I've been wanting to ask this question since last week. The question is that when you register under the institutional link, you register the university under the institutional link, how can we see those that are registered under that link? Maybe the staff, the faculty staff, the faculty that are registered under that link. Is there a way we can view them under the institutional link sent to us?
Okay. If I might ask, what's your role in the institution? Are you like a what's the word now?
The coordinator or the
Exactly.
representative.
Thank you very much. That's what I'm trying to get at. Are you do you have an oversight role to know, is it your business to know who is registered?
Yes, I was given
okay.
Yeah, I was given the role to register the institution under that link. So I needed to check those that have registered so far.
Okay. So what you could do is you can send an email to us at info@chisquares.com and we will elevate your privileges so that you can have access to that information. Well, of course, as you can imagine, I was asking that because it's not everybody's business to know who has registered it unless it's your prerogative. So you can send us an email and we would evaluate your privileges and make those changes.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Prof, someone wants to contact you and they were asking which email they can use. Samson, before you. Yeah, Samson was asking.
Okay. You can contact us info@chisquares.com.
Okay. Isaac.
Info account.
No, not info@chisquares.com. Lungile will type it for us.
Okay. So I came across a tutorial video that's broken down into an average of 5 minutes per. I'm thinking I'm with self-learning as well, and I like it sometimes because it enables convenience and of course flexibility. You can always look to one for certain lessons. So Chi-Square actually developed something like that, such as short videos of an average of 5 minutes for lessons respectively. It will go a long way with it.
Yeah, we have a lot of videos like that now on our on our YouTube channel. So you can explore that, yeah.
That's nice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Let's see who else. Joseph, is that a new hand? See, you've already unmuted. You're ready to speak. Joseph?
I'm true. Hello? Prof has answered my question.
Okay. All right.
Charles,
Charles, is that an old hand? Charles Abimbola, you have asked questions, so I believe those are old hands.
Yes, it's an old hand. My hand is a good penny.
Thank you. All right. Okay. All right, Prof, I think that's it for today.
Right.
No new hands, no questions on the chat box.
All right, super.
You're smiling.
Well, you sound almost sad that there are no new questions.
Yes.
That is so funny.
Well done, Prof. Well done, Prof. Well done,
Hi.
Prof.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Well done. Well done.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'll see you next week.
I may answer before you leave.
Bye.
Which of
All right.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There's a voice. Oh, she's gone.
Bye.
Thank you. Who is struggling? Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Nelly Swa. Thank you, Elia. Wow. Yeah. Hawa. Thank you so much for your assistance. Is there anyone who's still struggling with LinkedIn, with accessing slides on LinkedIn? I can quickly show you. Esther, are you still here before you